I am Toussaint Louverture. My name is perhaps known to you.
He was called the Black George Washington. He fought off 3 empires and enraged Napoleon.
The prospect of a Black Republic is equally disturbing to the Spanish, the English, and the Americans.
He championed liberty and égalité for all, Toussaint Louverture and the Haitian Revolution.
This program was made possible by the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Haiti is always described as the poorest country in the Western Hemisphere. But during its height as Saint-Domingue, it was the richest place in the Americas. The thing about it, though, is that its richness was all rooted in slaves. Its wealth was based on human capital, on owning that human capital.
All day, as long as the sun is shining, the men are bending over and swaying a machete at the foot of the sugarcane.
The world as you know it disappears. Therefore, you become an animal, and you expect to live like an animal.
The dominion of the master had to be absolute, but that absoluteness itself made the master into something other than human as well.
Liberty, equality, fraternity, that was new for the world.
Toussaint Louverture is the epitome of humanity. He realized early on that the condition he was in was totally insufferable.
Toussaint Louverture recruited about 3,000 to 4,000 people, trained them, and they fought the French, the British, and the Spanish army for 12 years.
They burned the mechanisms of their production. They're burning the plantation fields, burning down the houses.
It was a wholesale massacre on a really, really enormous scale. It was a big, big, major payback time.
The Haitian Revolution is probably the most profound revolution ever realized by human beings. The only place where slaves created a nation. But nobody wants to talk about it.
In the summer of 1789, when Haiti was still the dormant colony of Saint-Domingue, it was France that grabbed the world's attention. Parisian mobs rioted against the French king and against their own desperate poverty. Chanting slogans for liberty, equality, and brotherhood, they sparked a revolution that would fill history books for centuries to come.
The trick about the French Revolution was that it meant a lot of different things to a lot of different people.
In the streets of Paris, the French Revolution meant an end to the appalling privileges of wealth. And France's brand new Congress, called the National Assembly, it meant the ideas of Europe's most radical thinkers could be realized.
Nobody knows exactly what's going to come out of it, but just the idea of having rights, right? The idea that all people have rights, that those rights are inherent. This was something that obviously philosophers had written about before, but during the course of the French Revolution, it was written down in a text called the Declaration of the Rights of Man.
It's a dangerous idea because the society is based on inequality. That's what makes it work, because it was not supposed to work for everybody. It was supposed to work for a minority.
What was a dangerous idea in France was even more dangerous in its slaveholding colonies off the coast of Florida. Martinique, Guadeloupe, and an island known as the Pearl of the Antilles. Today, the western half is Haiti. Then it was the French colony of Saint-Domingue.
One thing that's fascinating about that time, people think things were very far away. They were not. News traveled very, very fast.
We have to remember that the ocean was like a highway in the 18th century. I mean, the ships were constantly bringing news back and forth. Everyone was obsessed with news. Sailors would come off the ships. The first people they would talk to, the people they would work with as they were unloading the ships, were enslaved people. So there are reports who were describing the events that have been going on in Paris to the enslaved that are working alongside of them.
Few intended colonial slaves should take democratic ideas to heart. Far too much was at stake. Sugar greased the wheels of the 18th century economy, and Saint-Domingue was the sugar capital of the world. It was easy, even for France's political radicals, to ignore the agony that made it all possible.
The leaves of the sugarcane are just like minuscule saw. If they cut you, you may not even see it. But when you perspire, the sweat gets in it and it burns. In the roots, there are ants. They bite. And when they bite you, you will scratch yourself for half a day.
If the worker refuses to work, well, there is a law which you just shoot him, that's all.
The whole concept of slavery itself is a totally savage one. The French, they brought it down to science. A slave coming from Africa would not last 3 years, the way the system was organized. They had it down to that kind of statistics. They did it very systematically, and it was very successful.
Slavery in Saint-Domingue succeeded too on a foundation of relentless terror. Slave owner Stanislas Saint-Fouache explained it as rational management.
Slow punishments make a greater impression than quick or violent ones. Rather than 50 lashes administered in 5 minutes, 25 lashes of the whip administered in a quarter of an hour. This is far more likely to make an impression.
The accounts about the tortures inflicted on slaves are often horrifying. Legs cut off or arms cut off, amputations for runaways, rubbing hot powder or pepper and so forth into the wounds. Slaves actually hung and left to die. You can kind of imagine that this kind of world in which essentially human life was given so little value that these tortures were kind of refined to this incredible, cruel effect.
Despite the brutal tools of control, some blacks managed to escape slavery. Many had been born free, fathered by white planters. Others had gained freedom through their own wits or talents. One such man was Toussaint Louverture.
I was born a slave, but nature gave me the soul of a free man.
Toussaint Louverture was a very determined man. He was a very ambitious man. And in my opinion, he was a genius.
Toussaint is, I think, one of the most incredible figures that I know about in many ways. He's born on a plantation in Saint-Domingue. He grows up on that plantation.
That plantation was owned by a man who was tolerant for the times. Toussaint was taught to read and write as a child.
He eventually occupies a somewhat privileged role, if you can say that, on a plantation as a coachman and has a kind of relationship with the managers and masters in some ways. He becomes free in the 1770s, so he's somebody who kind of occupied different roles in society. And I think that's the key for understanding Toussaint, is that he saw possibilities where other people didn't.
He had businesses, had contacts in the US and elsewhere, bank accounts, managed his affairs pretty well. The man was endless in organizational capacity. I mean, he would have been a fantastic CEO today.
Toussaint didn't record his first reactions to the revolution in France, but his fellow free Saint-Dominguans, the white colonials, and the mixed-race population were transfixed.
In 1789, there were about 40,000 white people and about 30,000 colored people who were, of course, their sons and cousins and so on and so forth, who were landowners themselves, many of them, slave owners themselves, many of them, very effective businessmen, many of them, involved romantically with the white master class.
One of the things that's important to remember about Haiti and race is it wasn't simply black and white. Instead, you had numerous gradations of color. One historian went so far as to give 110 categories of color, from absolute black to absolute white. And to each combination, he gave a name: mulatto, quadroon, Mameluke. And what he was accounting for was the drops of black blood.
Whites hoped for more control over the colony's governance, but the colony's mixed-race population hoped for more fundamental changes. They had been born free, but not equal.
They had to show physical respect for the white. Stand up when they are in presence of a white, call them Mr. or whatever title they wanted to have. It was not easy for them, and that's exactly why they were the first one, before the blacks, they were the first one to ask for equality.
The mixed-race population of Saint-Domingue decided their chance had come in 1791. They sent a petition to France's new government asking for the rights of citizenship.
This is a powerful message to have been taking place in a society that was explicitly organized on inequality. It's like dynamite.
The petition asked for civil protections, and it enraged the island's white population. Working-class colonists began a full-scale intimidation campaign. They threatened, beat, and murdered mixed-race residents in the capital. But the petition met a different reception back in Paris. The new breed of delegates in the National Assembly issued a landmark decree. They extended equal rights to the small population of mixed-race people born of two free parents. Despite the reform's limited extent, the governor of Saint-Domingue refused to obey. Colonial whites felt profoundly betrayed. Some, such as a planter's wife named Madame de Rouvray, began discussing radical thoughts of their own.
The National Assembly is committed to destroying our lives as masters, so much so that secession from France might be necessary. the slave owners of America, I hope, will band together to stop this contagion of liberty.